they have something called electronic dissolution of memory. You've probably heard of that, right?
No, but I mean...
Okay. Well, electronic dissolution of memory is just, in other words...
So it's like wiping the disk
Wiping your memories.
Okay.
Yeah, wiping your memories. And I know that that was done in my case, including with the use of drugs and hypnosis. And this goes to the mind control, some of the mind control operations that they had. These are just very nefarious, Keith, and it all ties in. It depends on what the individual person was involved in, but it certainly ties into some of what I did find out was going on in these underground, facilities, and that's such a large subject.
I know.
It's such a large subject. But I think something that's important to mention is you would have to use your discernment. And you mentioned one fellow that you spoke with, and he sounds to me, I don't know him, but he sounds to me as if he's credible, like
yeah, he is.
Telling the truth. And just from what you said, it sounded very credible to me. What I suggest to people is that when you hear these kind of stories, consider the source. Consider the source. If the person appears to be credible, if they have some kind of documentation perhaps, or maybe they can corroborate the information through another source, or you're just using your own reasoning to find out what you believe. But the problem, if we can just get into this, because I think this is a good way to get into this media stuff that we were speaking about. The problem is that the people that are controlling all these black operations, and CIA is certainly heavily involved, as are other agencies, they have a vested interest in, keeping the truth, whatever the truth may be, whatever various truths are out there about what's happening. They have an interest in keeping that truth from people, from the public. So what they do is they know that some of this is always going to come out. You're going to get somebody like this fellow that you mentioned, or many others, who have actually been inside, they've been involved in something, and some of these people have a conscience and they want the truth to come out, and they care, they care about the country, and they care about the truth, and they care about liberty, so they'll report on these things. So what you're going to find then is you're going to get an army of disinformation specialists who are going to come out with similar information, except for that a lot of the information is false. You see? Mm-hmm. And that goes right into any media, okay? And I don't care if you're calling it alternative media. The mainstream media, forget. It's owned lock, stock, and barrel. They're not even something to be considered about the truth. There's no truth there. But in the so-called alternative media, and that includes any radio or TV shows that you see on the Internet or websites or anything like that, and for the most part, I'm talking about not the mainstream media. Most of what you find out there is precisely what I just said, this government disinformation. Because, they saturate the alternative media with this government disinformation, and that's when you get all the fear-mongers. We were talking about this before we got on to the show. The fear-mongers, people out there talking about, there's going to be another terrorist attack, and they predict these dates, and they're going to declare martial law on Saturday, and this is going back, like, I can remember this stuff from 10 years ago, right?
I know. I'm glad you said that.
And then there's the Chinese troops.
Yes, the Chinese troops on the Mexican border.
The Chinese troops, and the most bizarre story that I ever heard, and I won't name any names, Keith. Some of these people that are doing this or were doing it, I mean, some of them are people that I know that I have, since disassociated myself from. But in any case, there was one spin on these Chinese troops that they were Chinese robotoids, meaning that they were some kind of cyborg thing, created. I'm not saying that something like this couldn't exist or doesn't exist. That's not the point. But to state that there's an army of Chinese robotoids on the Mexican border, I mean, come on, And then, people do this fear-mongering, and then when something actually that's real, something that's a serious threat, people tend to downplay it because it doesn't measure up to the Chinese robotoids.
Let me give you an example of this too.
Okay.
Interesting you should say this. One, the thing, if I hear one more report about Chinese troops on the Mexican border, I'm going to hurl. But you know what happened was, I mean, I called somebody out once, and this was years ago. This is like 04, 05, because I got sick of it back then. And I said, I'll tell you what. I said, I'll fly out there. You just put me up one night. You take me out there, and I'll bring photographic equipment, and I'll photograph these guys.
The Chinese on the border.
That's right. Or, I mean, as long as it takes. And, you know, all of a sudden, you know, they shut up, and it just somehow couldn't happen. And my point is, in this day and age, if people are seeing this with their cell phone, you know, videos, anything, why don't you just take some photos that can fix the Chinese troops, that they are definitely in the border area, and I'll be happy with that. But if everybody's, quote, seeing this, and there is no legitimate photographic evidence of such, then, you know, what are we doing here?
Well, yeah. I mean, but it's important to remember the people that are being used. Now, there's different categories of people, Keith. You know, I mean, there are people out there, and I'm not naming names, as I said before, but there are people out there that I can give you examples of the type of thing. The person, let's say a person has a legitimate case, whatever it may be. The person is a whistleblower of some kind, has been there, done that, has seen things, or even an investigative journalist, you know, somebody who has investigated and researched or experienced various things. That person can start out with very legitimate information. But what happens is, you know, immediately, as soon as they have feelers out, you know, the government and all their little organizations and agencies, and as soon as they see somebody that's out there telling the truth about something, they'll immediately swamp that person. They'll approach from a number of angles that they can try to bribe, you know, not necessarily a criminal bribe, but say, well, we're offering you this contract for this show, you know. Or we want to publish your information or whatever, you know. And the next thing you know, if the person is not solid, I'm talking about if the person doesn't have a solid core of integrity, that the truth is the most important thing and doing the right thing, that person can be easily swayed and influenced because they're looking for publicity, they're looking for approval, you know, approval seekers, looking for attention. And I can think of scores, literally scores of people like that I have personally known that have gone down the wrong path, all because they allowed their ego gratification or money, to rule their lives.
Let me give you an example, too, when you're talking about real terrorism, perhaps, from the fake terrorism. I don't know if you remember this or not, but it's an eerie episode that never really was, well, and deliberately so, not investigated. My former partner, who comes around every so often, is a straight shooter. And one day, I forget when it was now, 2004, I think, he gets up very early, and he had heard a radio report.
Now, what kind of partner are you speaking about?
Oh, well, it was Harry when we both did the first version, if you would, of Beyond the Grassy Knoll. Huh? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't clear on who. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and you never spoke with Harry because we never really did a show.
Okay.
But he comes in one day and he goes, "Hey, listen, I just listened to Clear Channel out of Orlando, which is 5:40 a.m. And their morning guy, whose name I forget, you know, like everything else, I'll think of it about 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. But he said he read a story about a near miss of what was, I guess, thought to have been a shoulder harness surface-to-air missile that just missed an American
like a Stinger type thing.
Yeah, that just
missed shoulder launch. Yeah, go ahead.
That just missed an American airline plane ascending out of LAX bound for Chicago. And this is on the record.